The city never truly slept. Even in the late hours, headlights flickered like restless fireflies, and neon signs buzzed above narrow alleyways. Footsteps echoed on damp sidewalks, mingling with the distant hum of traffic. Amidst the chaos, a lone figure moved silently, unnoticed by most. A stray dog with thick, matted fur, the color of midnight. His name was Bruno. No one had given him that name. It had simply become his identity, whispered by kind strangers who tossed him scraps, or by the few who had seen him enough times to acknowledge his silent presence. Bruno didn't belong to anyone, but he had someone. Every morning before the sun had fully risen, a little girl with bright eyes and a red backpack would pass through the neighborhood. Unlike others who walked briskly, avoiding eye contact, she always stopped by the corner where Bruno waited. "Morning, Bruno," she chirped, her small hands reaching into her lunchbox. A piece of bread, sometimes a slice of ham, a careful offering placed gently before him. Bruno never rushed. He would take a cautious step forward, sniff the food, and then, only once she smiled, would he accept it. She didn't know where he went after that, but Bruno knew exactly where she went, and so he followed. Not too close, just enough to keep her within sight. From the shadows of parked cars, behind lampposts, or the corners of alleyways, his watchful eyes remained fixed on her small frame as she made her way to the schoolyard. Once she stepped through the gates, Bruno would pause, his ears twitching, ensuring she was safe. Then he would turn away, disappearing back into the streets. This was his routine, his silent duty, until the night it all changed. The rain started just after sundown. Bruno curled up in his usual spot near a bakery, his body pressed against the cool brick wall. The scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air, though the shop had closed hours ago. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Bruno's ears twitched. Something was wrong. The little girl hadn't come that morning. At first, he thought maybe she was sick. Maybe she had stayed home. But as the day stretched on, a strange unease settled deep in his chest. By nightfall, it became unbearable. Bruno rose to his feet. His instincts screamed, "Find her!" His paws splashed against puddles as he navigated the labyrinth of streets, his nose working furiously, searching for any trace of her scent. He passed the school, the playground, the bench where she sometimes sat with her mother. Nothing. Then he heard it. Voices. Frantic. Desperate. He followed the sound to a small group of people gathered near a street lamp. The girl's mother stood among them, her face pale, her hands gripping her phone tightly. "She was supposed to be home hours ago," she said, her voice trembling. "She always takes the same route. I don't understand." Bruno's ears flattened. She was gone. The city had swallowed her up, and Bruno was going to find her. His nose hit the ground, inhaling deeply. The rain had washed away much of the scent, but not all of it. A faint trail remained. Bruno followed it, weaving through alleyways, past dumpsters and dimly lit storefronts. It led him somewhere he had never dared to go before, an old abandoned warehouse. The windows were shattered, the walls covered in peeling paint. A single dim light flickered above the entrance. Bruno's fur bristled. She was here. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Inside, something moved, a shadow. Bruno steeled himself. He had spent his life surviving in the streets, but this was different. This wasn't about him. This was about her, and Bruno would fight until his last breath to bring her home. The wind howled through the broken windows, rattling loose metal sheets. The scent of rust, old wood, and something foul clung to the air. Bruno hesitated only for a moment before stepping forward, his paws making no sound against the wet concrete. Then, a noise, a faint whimper. His ears snapped forward. She was inside. Bruno lowered his head and crept along the outer wall. His heart pounded, his instincts screaming at him to be cautious. He didn't know what lay beyond the doorway, but he had no choice. For the first time in his life, Bruno wasn't just surviving. He was fighting for something, someone. With one last deep breath, he stepped into the darkness. Bruno stepped through the broken doorway, his paws silent against the cold concrete floor. The air inside the warehouse was thick with dampness, dust, and something foul, something that made his fur bristle. A faint whimper echoed in the distance. His ears twitched. "She's here." Bruno moved cautiously, his muscles tense, his nose working furiously to pick up her scent. The warehouse was massive, with rusted metal beams stretching high above, and rows of abandoned machinery casting eerie shadows. Water dripped from broken pipes, creating rhythmic splashes that echoed through the silence. He slunk between stacks of rotting wooden crates, his body low, his tail still. Every instinct in him screamed danger. Then he caught it, her scent. It was faint but unmistakable. She had been here, recently. Bruno followed the trail, weaving past old barrels and rusted carts, his heart pounding. The scent led him deeper, toward the farthest corner of the warehouse, where the shadows thickened. And then, a sound. Not a whimper this time, a shuffle. Something else was here. Bruno froze, his ears flicking toward the noise. He could hear slow, deliberate footsteps, the kind that didn't belong to a lost little girl. His muscles coiled, ready to flee or fight. A beam of moonlight streamed through a shattered skylight, illuminating the space just ahead. And that's when he saw them. Two men. They stood near a pile of broken pallets, whispering in low voices. One of them was tall and broad, his hoodie pulled low over his face. The other was thinner, his hands fidgeting as he spoke. Bruno didn't understand human words, but he understood tone, and theirs was wrong. His growl started low, deep in his throat, his hackles rising. Then he saw it, a small figure huddled behind one of the pallets, her red backpack. Bruno's breath caught. "She's here." The men hadn't noticed him yet. He took another silent step forward, his eyes locked on the girl. She was curled up, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face hidden. She was scared. Bruno's growl deepened. This wasn't a game. This wasn't just survival. This was his girl, and she was in danger. Then the taller man shifted, his foot kicking a loose can. The noise echoed through the warehouse. The girl flinched. The men turned, and their eyes landed on Bruno. For a moment there was silence. Then, "What the hell?" the shorter man muttered. The taller one stepped forward. "It's just a stray." Bruno bared his teeth. Just a stray? Not tonight. Tonight he was a guardian. The taller man reached into his jacket, his movements slow, measured. Bruno's instincts screamed. He was pulling something out. A weapon? A knife? He didn't know, and he didn't care. Bruno lunged. His body was a blur of muscle and fur as he launched himself at the man, his teeth sinking into the thick fabric of the jacket. The man staggered back, shouting in surprise, swinging wildly. Bruno held on, shaking his head violently, refusing to let go. The second man cursed and lunged forward, trying to grab him. Bruno released his grip and jumped back, dodging just in time. His heart pounded, adrenaline surging through his veins. He growled, his body low, ready to attack again. The men hesitated. "Good. Be scared." The taller man clutched his arm where Bruno had bitten him, his expression twisted in anger. "Forget this. Let's go." The shorter man hesitated. "What about—" "Leave her." Bruno stood his ground, his teeth still bared, his eyes locked onto them. The men exchanged one last glance, then turned and bolted toward the opposite exit, their footsteps pounding against the concrete. A door slammed in the distance. And then, silence. Bruno didn't move. His ears strained, his breathing heavy. He waited, listening. Nothing. They were gone. He turned, his eyes falling on the girl. She was still curled up, her small body trembling, her face buried in her arms. Bruno stepped forward slowly, cautiously. He didn't want to startle her. With a soft whine, he nudged her knee. The girl gasped, her head snapping up, her wide, tear-filled eyes locked onto his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, "Bruno?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but he heard it. His tail wagged once, just a little. The girl let out a shaky breath, her lips trembling. "You found me." Bruno whined again and licked her hand gently. She sniffled and wiped her tears, her fingers tangling in his fur. "Let's go home." Bruno turned toward the exit, but just as he took a step, a distant sound made his ears perk up. Sirens. They were coming. Bruno looked back at the girl, his heart pounding. He had found her. But their night was far from over. The sirens wailed in the distance, their echoes bouncing off the cold warehouse walls. The little girl stiffened, her small fingers gripping Bruno's fur tightly. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. Bruno's ears twitched. He wasn't sure what the sirens meant, but he could tell from the girl's trembling body that she was still afraid. He nudged her gently, his warm breath brushing against her cheek. She wiped her tears and sniffled. "We have to go." Bruno understood. His eyes darted toward the exit, a rusted metal door half open, swaying slightly from the wind. The two men had fled through there, but were they still nearby? Bruno's instinct screamed for caution. The girl struggled to her feet, her legs shaky. She clutched her backpack to her chest and took a step forward, but her knee buckled. She gasped, almost falling. Bruno was there in an instant, pressing his side against her. She steadied herself, looking down at him. "Thanks, Bruno." His tail wagged slightly. With careful steps, they made their way toward the exit. The air was thick with the scent of rust and oil, and every creak of the floorboards beneath them made Bruno's ears flick in alarm. His eyes darted to every shadow, every flickering light. They reached the door. The girl hesitated, peering outside. The alley beyond was dark, lit only by a single flickering street lamp. Trash bins were knocked over and puddles reflected the faint city lights. The sirens grew louder. The girl clutched Bruno's fur. What if those men come back? Bruno's fur bristled. He didn't know. He only knew one thing. He had to get her out of here. He stepped forward first, his nose twitching, scanning the air. Nothing. No scent of the men, no movement. Just the damp chill of the night. Safe. For now. Bruno turned back and nudged the girl forward. She swallowed hard and stepped into the alley, her sneakers splashing against the wet pavement. The wind howled through the narrow space, sending discarded newspapers fluttering past them. Bruno's ears stayed alert, his body tense, ready to defend her if needed. Then, footsteps. Bruno froze. The girl gasped, pressing her back against the warehouse wall. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, coming from around the corner. A shadow stretched across the pavement. Bruno growled low, his teeth bared. The girl gripped his fur, her body trembling. Then a voice. Deep, steady. "Hey, it's okay." A man stepped into view. Tall, broad shoulders, a uniform. A police officer. The girl gasped. "A police officer." Bruno's growl softened, but he didn't relax just yet. The officer took a cautious step forward, his flashlight shining on them. His eyes widened. "Are you Emily Carter?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." The officer exhaled sharply. "We've been looking for you," he spoke into his radio. "I found her. She's safe." "Repeat, she's safe." Bruno felt the tension in the air shift, relief. The girl's knees buckled, and she collapsed to the ground sobbing. The officer rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "You're okay now. You're safe." Bruno sat beside her, his warm body pressed against her side. The girl sniffled. "Bruno found me. He saved me." The officer glanced at the dog, his expression softening. Did he now? Bruno lifted his head proudly. The distant sirens grew louder, flashing lights reflecting off the damp pavement. The girl's mother would be here soon. People would take her home. Bruno should have felt at ease. But something wasn't right. A scent, faint, fading, but unmistakable. Bruno's ears twitched. His fur bristled. The men, they were still nearby, watching, waiting. Bruno stood up, his body tense, his eyes locked onto the alley's dark corners. The officer noticed. "What's wrong, boy?" Bruno growled low and deep. Then from the darkness, a whisper of movement. Bruno's muscles coiled. A shadow flickered at the end of the alley. Someone was still there. Bruno took a slow step forward, his nose twitching furiously. The scent was stronger now. One of the men had lingered. Why? Bruno's growl deepened. His body went rigid. The officer noticed and turned his hand instinctively, reaching for his gun. Is someone there? Silence. Then, a metallic clatter. Something was moving behind the dumpsters. The girl whimpered. Bruno stepped in front of her, his fur bristling, his stance firm. The officer unholstered his weapon. Come out! A tense moment passed. Then a figure stepped into the light. Bruno's breath caught. It wasn't one of the men. It was a boy, maybe 16 or 17. His hoodie pulled low over his face. His hands were up, shaking. Don't shoot, he stammered. I was just... His eyes flickered toward Emily. Bruno growled. The officer lowered his gun slightly but kept his stance firm. Who are you? What are you doing here? The boy hesitated. Then his voice barely above a whisper, he said, I know who took her. Bruno's ears perked. The girl gasped. The night wasn't over yet. The alley fell silent. The only sound was the distant wail of sirens and the occasional drip of water from a rusted pipe. The officer kept his gun lowered but his stance firm. Bruno, standing protectively in front of Emily, let out a low growl. The boy in the hoodie took a shaky breath. His hands were still raised. I didn't do anything, he said quickly. I swear. The officer narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The boy hesitated. Then, glancing nervously at the dark corners of the alley, he whispered, My name's Jake, and I know who took her. Bruno's ears perked. Emily gasped. The officer's grip tightened on his gun. Explain. Now. Jake swallowed hard. His eyes darted around as if expecting someone to jump out at any second. He took a slow step forward, but Bruno let out another growl, stopping him in his tracks. Jake raised his hands higher. Okay. Look, I didn't kidnap her, but I saw who did. Emily clutched Bruno's fur. Who? Jake hesitated. Two guys. One tall, one shorter, with a scar on his face. I heard them talking. The officer's jaw tightened. Talking about what? Jake exhaled sharply. Something about a deal. A trade. Emily's breath hitched. Bruno's tail stiffened. The officer took a slow step forward. A trade? You mean they were planning to sell her? Jake nodded. Emily's face turned pale. Bruno could sense the fear rising in her again. The officer's radio crackled. Unit 34. We're nearing the scene. ETA 2 minutes. He pressed the button. Copy that. Then turning back to Jake, he said, Why didn't you go to the police earlier? Jake shifted uncomfortably. Because... His voice trailed off. Bruno sniffed the air, taking in the boy's scent. There was something familiar about it, something that reminded him of the warehouse. The officer frowned. Because what? Jake sighed. Because I know them. Emily tensed. Bruno's eyes locked onto Jake. They're part of a crew, Jake muttered. Not a gang, but people who do things for money. I used to run with them, okay? But I didn't know they were into... He gestured toward Emily. The officer's gaze hardened. And now? Jake looked at Emily. His expression softened. Now I want to make it right. Bruno didn't trust him yet. He stood firm, his body still tense. The officer studied Jake's face. Then he asked, Where would they take her if the deal didn't go through? Jake hesitated. If the deal went bad, they'd probably hide out at their second spot. Where? Jake bit his lip. Then finally he said, An old auto shop. 2 streets down. Bruno let out a small huff, as if confirming something. The officer turned to Emily. Your parents will be here soon. I'll stay with you until they arrive. But Emily shook her head. Bruno and I can't leave yet. The officer blinked. What? Emily clenched her fists. Those men are still out there. What if they take another kid? Bruno let out a soft whine. He understood. Emily wasn't just thinking about herself. She wanted to stop them. The officer sighed. It's too dangerous. Jake shifted. I can lead you there. The officer's eyes narrowed. You sure about that? Jake nodded. I have to make this right. Bruno's tail flicked. He wasn't sure if Jake could be trusted. But he knew one thing. Emily was determined to see this through. The officer spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, I need backup at the old auto shop, 2 streets east of my location." "Copy that. Units en route." He turned to Emily. "Stay with the other officers when they get here." Emily shook her head. "I'm going with you." Bruno barked once, firm. The officer sighed. "Fine, but you stay close to me. And Bruno," he looked at the dog, "you watch her." Bruno didn't need to be told twice. The group moved swiftly through the city streets, Jake leading the way. The auto shop was a run-down building with shattered windows and rusted metal doors. The scent of oil and gasoline filled the air. Bruno's nose twitched. They were here. The officer signaled for silence. "Stay low." Emily crouched behind a stack of tires, Bruno beside her. From inside, voices murmured. Bruno's ears twitched. They were planning something. The officer peeked through a broken window. Inside, 2 men were pacing. One tall, one shorter. The man with the scar. Jake tensed. "That's them," the officer whispered into his radio. "Suspects confirmed. Moving in soon." Then, a loud creak. Emily gasped. One of the men turned toward the window. Bruno's body tensed. Had they been seen? The officer gritted his teeth. "Stay down." But it was too late. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. Then his gaze locked onto the window. A smirk spread across his face. He knew. Bruno's muscles coiled. The night was far from over. Bruno's fur bristled. The scarred man's gaze locked onto the broken window. For a moment, no one moved. Then, he smirked. A chill ran through Bruno's spine. "He knows we're here." The officer pressed his radio. "Suspects aware of our presence. Need immediate backup." "Copy that. Units are 3 minutes out." 3 minutes? That was too long. The scarred man whispered something to his partner. The taller man nodded and disappeared into the shadows of the garage. Jake's breathing quickened. "They're up to something." The officer motioned for silence. He glanced at Emily, whispering, "Stay here. Don't move." Emily clutched Bruno's fur. He could feel her tiny fingers trembling. Bruno's ears flicked. Footsteps, fast, approaching the side door. Then, bang! The side door burst open. The taller man lunged out, swinging a metal pipe. The officer barely dodged, rolling to the side. The pipe slammed into the pavement, sending sparks flying. Jake gasped, stumbling backward. The scarred man sprinted toward them, a knife glinting in his hand. Bruno leaped. His jaws clamped down on the man's arm. The scarred man screamed, dropping the knife. He thrashed, trying to shake Bruno off, but Bruno held on, growling deep in his throat. Emily scrambled away, eyes wide. The officer tackled the taller man, knocking him to the ground. The metal pipe clattered away. Bruno's grip tightened. The scarred man punched Bruno's side. Pain shot through his ribs, but Bruno didn't release. Another punch. Bruno's jaw loosened for just a second, enough for the man to break free. He stumbled back, clutching his bleeding arm. His furious eyes locked onto Bruno. "You stupid mutt!" he hissed. Bruno growled, stepping in front of Emily. The man reached for his knife. Emily screamed, "Bruno, watch out!" But before the man could strike, Jake tackled him. The scarred man crashed against a stack of crates, sending them tumbling down. Jake panted, fists clenched. "Not this time." Bruno's ears perked. Police sirens. The backup had arrived. The scarred man cursed. He glanced at his partner. They were outnumbered now. "Time to go," he muttered. Before anyone could stop him, he turned and sprinted into the darkness of the garage. Jake swore. "He's getting away." The officer pinned the taller man. "Stay with Emily," he ordered, then ran after the scarred man. Bruno didn't hesitate. He bolted after them. Emily gasped, "Bruno, no!" But he was already gone, chasing the man into the shadows. The garage was a maze of old cars and rusted metal beams. The scarred man ran fast, weaving between debris, but Bruno was faster. Bruno's paws hit the ground hard. He had to stop him. The man turned a corner, and Bruno lunged. His jaws snapped shut around the man's pant leg. The scarred man tripped, slamming into the concrete. He let out a sharp yell, kicking at Bruno wildly. Bruno yelped as a boot caught his side, sending him rolling. The man scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily. His eyes darted around. Bruno growled and crouched low, ready to attack again. Then, the man's hand closed around a metal wrench. Bruno tensed. The man grinned, lifting the wrench. "Let's see how brave you are now, mutt." Bruno's muscles coiled. Then, a voice. "Freeze!" The officer stood at the entrance, gun raised. The man hesitated. Bruno didn't. He leaped. His weight crashed into the man's chest, knocking him backward. The wrench flew from his grip, clattering across the floor. The officer moved fast. In seconds, he had the man pinned, cuffs snapping around his wrists. "Nice work, Bruno," the officer murmured. Bruno panted. His ribs ached, but he didn't care. It was over. The scarred man growled, struggling against the cuffs. "This isn't over," he spat. The officer tightened the cuffs. "Yes, it is." Outside, flashing red and blue lights painted the garage walls. Emily came running. "Bruno!" She dropped to her knees and hugged him tightly. Bruno let out a soft huff, nuzzling her shoulder. Tears welled in her eyes. "You saved me again." Bruno licked her cheek. Jake stood nearby, watching in silence. The officer walked over. "Jake!" Jake looked up, shoulders tense. The officer studied him for a long moment. Then finally he said, "You did the right thing tonight." Jake exhaled shakily. Emily clutched Bruno's fur. "What happens now?" The officer glanced at the arrested men. "They'll never hurt anyone again." Emily let out a deep breath. It was finally over. Bruno nudged her gently. He could feel her heartbeat slowing. She was safe now, and that's all that mattered. Bruno's ribs ached with every breath, but he ignored the pain. Emily's small arms were wrapped around him, her face buried in his fur. He could feel her heartbeat, fast but steady. She was safe now. That was all that mattered. Police officers swarmed the scene, securing the area. The taller man was already being loaded into a police car, hands bound behind his back. The scarred man sat on the pavement, glaring at Bruno as an officer locked the cuffs around his wrists. "This isn't over," the man muttered, voice low and venomous. Bruno growled, ears flattening. He didn't trust that man. The officer shoved him forward. "Yeah, tell it to the judge." Emily clung to Bruno, whispering, "Let's go home." The officer turned to Jake. "We need your statement." Jake hesitated, glancing at Bruno and Emily. Bruno could sense the conflict in him. Jake wasn't sure where he belonged, whether he was one of them or still tied to his past. After a moment, Jake nodded. "All right." The officer led him away. Bruno nudged Emily's hand, sensing her exhaustion. She smiled, running her fingers through his fur. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Bruno." Bruno let out a soft huff, pressing his nose against her hand. For the first time in what felt like forever, the city felt quiet. Safe. But Bruno had learned something tonight. Danger never truly disappears. It just hides, waiting for the right moment. And he wasn't about to let his guard down. 2 days later, Emily sat on the couch, scratching Bruno's ears while the news played on the television. Authorities have confirmed that 2 suspects were taken into custody after attempting to abduct a child. Reports indicate that the incident was prevented by a stray dog, now being hailed as a hero. Bruno's ears flicked. Emily giggled. "That's you, Bruno. You're famous now." Bruno didn't care about fame. He only cared about her. Her father sat nearby, shaking his head. "It's incredible. I don't know how we'll ever repay you, boy." Bruno wagged his tail slightly. No payment needed. Only her safety. A knock at the door made them all turn. Emily's mother stood and opened it. Jake stood on the porch, hands stuffed in his pockets. Bruno immediately tensed. "Jake," Emily's mother asked cautiously. Jake exhaled. "I just wanted to check on Emily. And Bruno." Emily perked up. "Come in." Her mother hesitated but eventually stepped aside. Jake entered slowly, his eyes falling on Bruno. The 2 locked eyes. There was no hostility, just understanding. "You really are something, aren't you?" Jake muttered. Bruno didn't react. Jake cleared his throat. I, also came to say something else. Emily's father crossed his arms. And what's that? Jake hesitated. Then he finally said, the scarred man. He isn't working alone. Silence. Bruno's ears pricked. Emily's father frowned. What do you mean? Jake sighed. I've been doing some digging. Those men, they're part of something bigger. I don't know all the details yet, but I don't think they were just after Emily. I think they were after multiple kids. Emily's mother paled. Oh my God. Jake nodded. I know I messed up before. I was caught up in all the wrong things. But I want to make this right. He looked at Bruno. And I think you do too. Bruno stared at him, unmoving. Jake swallowed. There's someone else in the city, someone worse than them. And I think they know about Emily. Bruno's hackles raised. Emily's father clenched his fists. Do you have proof? Jake hesitated. Not yet, but I have a lead. Bruno didn't need words to understand. He could sense it. The danger wasn't over. Something, or someone, was still out there. Emily sensed Bruno's shift in mood and hugged him tighter. What do we do? She asked softly. Jake exhaled. We find them first. Bruno's muscles tensed. A new threat, a new hunt, and he would be ready. Bruno watched as Jake pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his jacket pocket. He handed it to Emily's father. What's this? The man asked, unfolding it. Jake's voice was low. An address. I think it's connected to them. Emily's father scanned the paper, his expression darkening. Bruno sniffed the air. The scent of fear was faint but present. Emily clung to Bruno, her small fingers gripping his fur. You won't let anything happen to me, will you, Bruno? Bruno licked her hand in response. Not as long as I breathe. The fight wasn't over yet. Bruno sat near the door, his ears alert. The tension in the room was thick, heavier than the night air outside. Emily sat beside him, her small hand resting on his back. He could feel her warmth, her trust. Her father held the crumpled paper Jake had given him, scanning the address again. His jaw was tight. This place, it's on the outskirts of town, he muttered. Jake nodded. I don't know what's there, but I heard them mention it before. If they have a hideout or something bigger planned, this could be it. Emily's mother paced nervously. We should call the police. Jake hesitated. We could, but if this is bigger than just those two men, we don't know who else might be involved. We need to be sure before we involve them. Bruno listened to their voices, but his focus was on the air itself. He could feel something shifting, like a storm approaching. Emily's father exhaled. I'll check it out. I'll go with you, Jake added quickly. No. Emily's mother shook her head. It's too dangerous. Jake looked at Bruno. We won't be going alone. Bruno's ears perked. Emily hugged him tightly. No, Bruno, you can't go. Bruno let out a soft whine, nudging her hand. He didn't want to leave her, but he knew what had to be done. Emily's father knelt in front of her. Sweetheart, Bruno is strong. He'll come back to you. I promise. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she nodded. Be careful. Bruno licked her cheek before stepping forward. He was ready. An hour later. The warehouse. The address led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was dark, the windows shattered, the metal door rusted. Jake exhaled. This place looks empty. Bruno sniffed the air. Number it wasn't. A scent lingered, faint but distinct. People had been here recently, more than just two. Emily's father tried the door. Locked. Jake pulled out a crowbar. Step back. With a grunt, he forced the door open. It groaned loudly, the sound echoing in the emptiness. Bruno stepped in first, muscles tense. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and something else. Fear. Jake pulled out a flashlight, sweeping it across the room. The place was filled with crates, old equipment, and broken furniture. It looked abandoned, but Bruno knew better. He moved forward, his paws silent against the concrete floor. His nose twitched. Then he smelled it. Sweat, a faint trace of cologne, and something metallic. Blood. Bruno's growl rumbled low in his throat. Jake and Emily's father stiffened. "What is it?" Jake whispered. Bruno moved toward a stack of crates, sniffing along the edge. His ears flicked. A sound. Faint. A shuffle. Someone was here. Jake turned off the flashlight. The darkness swallowed them. Then, a metallic click. A gun. Bruno lunged. The man hidden behind the crates let out a curse as Bruno's weight slammed into him. The gun fired, the shot echoing. Jake tackled the man, knocking the weapon away. Emily's father grabbed it and pointed it at the stranger. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man struggled, but Bruno stood over him, his teeth bared. Jake twisted his arm, making him wince. "You work for them, don't you?" The man spat. "You have no idea what you're messing with," Bruno growled, his body tense. Emily's father grabbed the man's collar. "Are there more of you?" The man chuckled darkly. "You're already too late." Bruno's ears twitched. Footsteps. Outside. More were coming. Jake swore. "We need to go." Bruno barked, his tail stiff. They had to move. Now. Emily's father hesitated for only a second before shoving the man aside. "Come on!" They sprinted toward the exit. As they burst outside, headlights flashed. A black van screeched to a stop, blocking their path. The doors flew open. Men stepped out. Armed, Bruno's fur bristled. It was a trap. Jake pulled out his knife. Emily's father raised the stolen gun, but they were outnumbered. A tall man stepped forward, his voice calm. "You shouldn't have come here," Bruno growled, standing his ground. The man smiled. "We've been watching you and the girl." Emily. Bruno's vision tunneled. His paws dug into the dirt. The man tilted his head. "Bring the dog. The boss wants him." Bruno's heart pounded. They weren't after just Emily anymore. They wanted him too. Bruno's body tensed as the men advanced, their movements slow and deliberate. They weren't after Jake or Emily's father. They were after him. Jake tightened his grip on his knife. "What do you mean that the boss wants him?" The tall man smirked. "That's not your concern." Bruno growled, baring his teeth. Emily's father kept the stolen gun raised. "Stay back." The man stepped forward. "Or what? You'll shoot?" Bruno saw it before it happened. A signal. The men lunged. Jake barely had time to react before two of them tackled him, slamming him to the ground. His knife skidded across the pavement. Emily's father fired. The shot missed. A man swung at him, knocking the gun from his grip. Bruno lunged, his teeth sinking into an attacker's arm. The man screamed. A boot swung, fast. Pain exploded in Bruno's ribs. He yelped, releasing his grip. Another hit. A metal rod. His vision blurred. His legs wobbled. A heavy net dropped over him. Bruno thrashed, but the weight pinned him down. Hands grabbed at him, forcing him still. A sharp sting in his side. A needle. His body felt heavy. His growls weakened. The last thing he heard was the tall man's voice, calm and satisfied. "Take him!" Then, darkness. Somewhere unknown. Bruno's eyes fluttered open. His body ached. Chains wrapped around his legs and neck, locking him to the cold concrete floor. The air smelled of rust, oil, and something else. Other animals. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Footsteps approached. The tall man crouched in front of him, his expression unreadable. "Awake already? You're stronger than I expected." Bruno's lips curled back. The man chuckled. "You have no idea how valuable you are, do you?" Bruno yanked at the chains. Too strong. The man leaned closer. "You've survived things no ordinary dog should. You fight like a soldier, and you're smart." He tilted his head. "Too smart." Bruno didn't like this. The man sighed dramatically. "My boss has been looking for a dog like you. One that can track, fight, and obey." Bruno's fur bristled. The man smirked. "If you had just stayed out of this, we wouldn't be having this conversation," Bruno growled. Emily, Jake, where were they? The man noticed his shift in posture and smirked. Worried about your little friends? He shrugged. They got away for now. Bruno's tail stiffened. The man leaned against the wall. They won't get far. My people are looking for them. And when we find them, he trailed off. Bruno's teeth snapped. The man chuckled. You have fire, that's good. You'll need it. He turned to leave. Bruno's mind raced. He needed to escape. Now his claws scraped against the floor. His muscles tensed. The man paused at the door. Oh, and one more thing. He gestured behind him. Bruno's ears twitched. Another set of footsteps echoed. Then he saw it. Another dog. A massive black Doberman stepped forward, its eyes cold and unreadable. A guard. The tall man smirked. Meet Titan. Bruno's body stiffened. Titan didn't growl. He didn't react. He simply stared. The man crouched beside Titan, scratching behind his ears. Titan here has been trained for one thing. Obedience. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't question. Bruno's tail flicked. Something was off. The man straightened. You have two choices, Bruno. Bruno's ears pricked. One, you fight for us, become like Titan, train, obey, and be part of something bigger. Bruno's fur bristled. The man smirked. Or two, you fight Titan. Bruno's muscles tensed. The man tilted his head. If you win, maybe we keep you alive. If you lose, well, we don't need weak dogs. Bruno let out a low growl. He wasn't afraid. The man clapped his hands. Good. You have an hour to decide. He turned and walked away. Titan didn't move. He simply stood there, watching. Bruno exhaled slowly. This dog wasn't just a mindless soldier. There was something deeper beneath that cold stare. Bruno's eyes flicked to the chains again. They were thick, but not unbreakable. Titan's ears twitched. He had noticed. Bruno tilted his head slightly. A silent test. Titan didn't react, but his eyes lingered on the chains for a second longer than necessary. Bruno's tail flicked. That hesitation meant something. Maybe, just maybe, Titan wasn't as loyal as they thought. Bruno's mind raced. If he played this right, he wouldn't just escape. He might gain an ally. The clock was ticking. He had 1 hour, and he needed a plan, fast. Bruno's mind raced. The chains around his legs and neck were thick, but he had broken free from worse. The real problem was Titan. The massive Doberman stood motionless, his dark eyes fixed on Bruno. He didn't growl or move, just watched. Bruno had seen dogs like him before, trained to obey, conditioned to follow orders. But something about Titan felt different. Bruno flicked his tail, a test. Titan's ears twitched slightly, a small reaction, but enough. There was hesitation. Bruno lowered his body slightly, appearing relaxed while studying everything. The room, the chains, the walls. The room was bare, a single door, a small window near the ceiling, too high to reach. The air smelled of dampness and metal. The chains rattled as Bruno shifted. The locks weren't simple, but they weren't impossible. Titan's gaze didn't waver. Bruno met his eyes. If Titan was truly loyal to these men, any sudden move could be fatal. But if there was doubt inside him, Bruno exhaled slowly. He needed to find that doubt and use it. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Bruno tensed. The door creaked open. The tall man stepped inside, smirking. Time's up, he said. Bruno didn't react. The man crouched beside him. Obedience or death? Bruno let out a low growl. The man sighed. You really are stubborn. He gestured to Titan. Then let's make this quick. Titan took a step forward. Bruno remained still, waiting, watching. Titan's eyes locked onto his. Bruno let out a slow breath. This was the moment. The man stepped back, giving the signal. Titan lunged, but not at Bruno. Instead, Titan stopped just short of him, his massive body blocking Bruno from the man's view. Bruno's heart pounded. It was a test. Titan's body was tense, breathing controlled. His ears twitched slightly toward Bruno. A silent message. Bruno understood. Titan wasn't fully loyal. The man, unaware, chuckled. Smart dog. You know better than to hesitate. Titan didn't react. Bruno made his move. Slowly, deliberately, he shifted his body, adjusting the way his chains were positioned. Titan saw it, but didn't stop him. Bruno's pulse quickened. Titan wasn't just hesitating, he was helping. The man turned away for just a second. It was enough. Bruno yanked his body hard. The chains strained, snapped. The movement was sudden. The man spun around, eyes widening. Bruno lunged, his teeth clamped down on the man's arm. A sharp yell. Titan moved, not to attack Bruno, but to block the exit. Bruno twisted, knocking the man off balance. Titan stepped forward, standing over him. Not attacking, just watching. The man's expression changed. Realization. You, he began, but Titan silenced him with a growl. Bruno stepped back. He was free. The man clenched his jaw. This isn't over. Bruno didn't care. He turned to Titan. A silent understanding passed between them. Titan had made his choice. Bruno flicked his tail. An invitation. For a second, Titan didn't move. Then he followed. Together they ran. The warehouse was a maze of corridors and locked doors. Bruno moved fast, trusting his instincts. Titan stayed close. They reached a metal door. Locked. Bruno growled in frustration. Titan moved past him, lowering his head. With a powerful lunge, he slammed against the door. It buckled. Another hit. The lock snapped. They burst into the night air. Bruno inhaled deeply. He was free, but it wasn't over. He turned to Titan. The Doberman was still tense, ears pricked. Bruno barked once. A question. Titan stared for a moment, then flicked his tail. Bruno understood. Titan wasn't running away. He was choosing a new path. Bruno turned his gaze to the city. Emily, Jake. They were still in danger. With Titan by his side, he sprinted into the night. He wasn't just a stray anymore. He was a guardian. Bruno and Titan raced through the dark streets, their paws barely touching the pavement. The city lights shimmered ahead, but time was slipping away. Emily and Jake were still in danger. Bruno knew where to go. The man had mentioned a location earlier, a shipping yard near the docks. If they were holding Emily and Jake there, he had to get there fast. Titan kept pace beside him, silent but determined. There was no hesitation in his steps. He had chosen his side. The scent of salt water grew stronger. The docks were close. Bruno's heart pounded. This was it. The shipping yard was massive, filled with towering metal containers, stacked high. Dim yellow lights flickered above, casting long shadows. Bruno slowed, lowering his body close to the ground. He had to be careful. Titan did the same. They moved as one. A voice echoed through the night. Hurry up! The boss wants them moved. Bruno's ears twitched. They were here. He crept forward, peering between the containers. Two men stood near a black van. Emily and Jake were inside, tied up. Emily's face was streaked with tears, but she wasn't struggling. Jake, however, was still fighting, his muffled voice barely audible through the cloth tied around his mouth. Bruno's teeth bared. No more waiting. He turned to Titan. The Doberman's muscles were tense, ears pricked forward. Bruno flicked his tail. Now Titan understood. Bruno sprang from the shadows. His sudden movement startled the first man. Too late. Bruno was already airborne. His body slammed into the man's chest, knocking him backward. The man's head hit the pavement with a sickening crack. Titan was right behind him. The second man barely had time to react before Titan lunged. A deep, menacing growl filled the air. The man scrambled backward, fumbling for a weapon. He never got the chance. Titan's jaws clamped onto his arm, forcing a scream from his lips. The gun he was reaching for clattered to the ground. Bruno didn't hesitate. He grabbed the gun in his jaws and flung it across the yard. Titan released his grip. The man fell, clutching his injured arm. Bruno turned to the van. Emily and Jake. He jumped onto the side, pawing at the door handle. Locked. Emily's eyes widened. Bruno? Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Titan stepped forward. With a powerful lunge, he slammed against the door. It popped open, Emily gasped as the ropes around her wrists came loose. Jake wiggled free next, yanking the cloth from his mouth. "Bruno!" Bruno barked once. "We have to go." Jake grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her out of the van. But before they could run, a gunshot rang out. Bruno's body tensed. The man Titan had attacked was still on the ground, but another figure stood nearby. The boss. His gun was aimed at them, his hand steady. "You ruined everything," he hissed. Titan stepped in front of Emily and Jake, his growl deep and dangerous. Bruno moved forward slowly, his ears back. The man's finger twitched on the trigger. "Get back," he ordered. Bruno didn't move. The man's jaw tightened. "I said—" A siren wailed in the distance. Police. Bruno's heart leaped, but the man wasn't backing down. Bruno had one chance. His eyes flicked to the side. Titan saw it. Bruno let out a low bark. Now Titan lunged. The man fired. The bullet missed. Titan slammed into him, knocking the gun from his hand. Bruno was already there. He grabbed the weapon, flinging it far away. The man scrambled back, his face pale. Red and blue lights flooded the yard. The police had arrived. The officers rushed in, weapons drawn. "On the ground!" The man didn't resist. He knew it was over. Emily collapsed to her knees, shaking. Jake wrapped his arms around Bruno, his voice breaking. "You saved us." Bruno leaned into him. Titan stood tall, his body tense. But when Emily reached out, he lowered his head, letting her touch him. She smiled through her tears. "Thank you." Titan's tail wagged. The nightmare was over. The next morning, Bruno sat outside the hospital watching the sunrise. Emily and Jake were safe. Their parents had arrived, hugging them so tightly Bruno thought they might never let go. The police had taken the criminals away. It was over. A gentle hand touched his head. Bruno looked up. Emily. She knelt beside him, her eyes still red but filled with warmth. "You never gave up on us," she whispered. Bruno licked her hand. Footsteps approached. Jake. Their parents. "Come home with us," Jake said. Bruno hesitated. Could he? A soft bark sounded behind him. Titan. The Doberman sat nearby, watching. Bruno understood. Titan had made his choice. Bruno turned back to Emily and Jake. His tail wagged. Jake grinned. "He's coming with us." Their parents exchanged glances, then smiled. Emily wrapped her arms around Bruno. "Welcome home." For the first time in his life, Bruno wasn't alone. He wasn't just a stray. He was family. The silent guardian lives on.